Welcome to a show called Think Fast, where every week we sit on hopefully Monday evenings and talk about all things business and have zero context sometimes, but we still act like we have context. Or rather, that's more about me. How have you been, Suchita? How has your week been? Since I'm talking this nice somber tone
I know
today in this
this is
episode.
this is what happens when you're like vacationed out and you've come
Yes,
from the beach and you have a
yes,
tan. Why don't you tell our dear
yes.
listeners where you were partying for the past couple
Was
of
not watching. Had
days?
a nice peaceful getaway to the sunny beaches of the Maldives for the last few days. Rejuvenated and also planning for some stuff which I have to announce soon. There's a startup in the making, but I shall not
Oh
give
my
details. Very early
God.
stages. This is
Can you
this is a mixture of brainstorm plus holiday, as I
can
call
you
it.
announce these things on Think Fast so our
I
ratings
will
go up
announce.
and
I
our
will announce it
listenership
on
goes
Think
up?
Fast.
Yes,
When it
Queen, let's do it.
Yes. But how was your week? What did you went for a wedding? I have noticed you running away from some dancing people on Instagram is what I
Oh my
noticed.
God, from my cousin brother. I was running away from him because I basically do not like dancing and I especially do not like dancing to Hindi songs. So he was trying to like drag me.
Can I tell you what
What
my ultimate playlist is, which is available on all platforms? Please look for it. It's a playlist
must be
called Raita.
what?
Because 12 बजे के बाद पार्टी में क्या फैलता है? Raita.
My God, I just can't. It's like every episode. This episode, I actually thought, shit, Varun's being serious. He's being mindful. He's being meticulous. He's, asking me how my weekend was. He hasn't digressed into susu or like,
We went to
potty and
Raita. I always
other
said it's Raita.
excretory. Oh my God. No, but weekends aside, what's happening in the world of business?
The women's Premier League auction happened. It's I mean more than anything else, I feel it's just like a moment, right? It's something to be celebrated. The fact that you're seeing more and more of women's cricket really coming into the limelight, and a
Yeah.
lot of these names are names which you know now, right? You know Smriti Mandana, you know Harmanpreet Kaur, and you also had cricketers from across the world now going to be playing in this. So I think it's fabulous. It's just going to be one of those pieces which I feel everybody is going to watch because it's going to be fun. And what's also happening is that it's the sport is genuinely exciting. Some of the things happening in women's cricket is actually sometimes a lot more exciting than the men's cricket.
Yeah, I need to jump on. I think the only thing that would make me jump on the cricket bandwagon would be women's cricket. I have a question for you. Do you think women's cricket will also help draw more women viewers to cricket? Because I can imagine the viewership, obviously being more skewed towards men.
Not
At
really.
least, at least that's
I
the like vibe you get when you look at stadiums, being packed out.
I feel like it'll make it more aspirational for more parents of girls who want to be sports people in the future to kind of go for that game, do that. It becomes a broader family experience for that as well. And I think it also
Hmm.
takes the aspiration value away from just being male cricketers to making
Yeah.
it cricketers and not male or female. There
Hmm.
was talk, I remember last season or the season before that, of doing a mixed or a couple of seasons back. I think this is pre-pandemic maybe, of doing a couple of mixed matches where you get male and female cricketers together and do a mixed team and play that out. Now it makes it simpler to do because a lot of these teams are the same. The Mumbai Indians is there, the Royal
Yeah.
Challengers Bangalore, you have Delhi Capitals. A lot of these teams have even same names. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see if that becomes the future. But I think it'll bring more families to the ground. And it kind of maybe even like add a little bit of newness to the sport because there's been so much cricket. It's been an overload of cricket that we're lacking some level of freshness. It just feels like, oh my god, there's one more match is where the reaction's going more than being excited for a match.
That is true, but I wouldn't know because I don't see any matches.
I
But in
watch
other
every match.
news, what else happened?
Air India Limited made aviation history. They've made the biggest aircraft order ever. They're buying 540 aircraft from Boeing and Airbus. I guess it was needed because if you've been on an Air India flight anytime recently, I mean, especially because of the sale and I think in general deterioration, the quality of the planes, just how the maintenance has been really bad, right? Just like, and
Yes,
I mean, all controversies aside, all the
peeing on people
urination
aside.
urination aside, I feel that it's just not been maintained, and end of March is when that period gets over, when they can actually make changes to the airline, because there was
Yeah.
I think a 1 year period where I think a larger policies could not be changed in the airline, and that's going to happen now. So I think it's all timed right. It's obviously a huge investment, but it'll be good to see Air India back to some
Resurrect
form of
itself.
glory. Yeah, because it's kind of
Yeah.
like it's been quite bad.
Yeah, let's see how glorious it gets. But in other news, and not so glorious news for Mr. Travis Kalanick, whose venture CloudKitchens has shut business in India and laid off its entire staff of about 40 members in the final week of December. For those of you who don't know, CloudKitchens, as the name suggests, is basically uh, a provider of cloud kitchens to large businesses, and they were, suppliers. They were basically cloud kitchen outfitters for companies like Theo Broma and the likes. What
Yeah,
do
I
you
think
make of
Mama
this,
go to a
man?
few others.
Mr.
Um,
Travis Kalanick is quiet.
Yeah, and I feel also, if you think about it, this is like a kitchen infrastructure business that's come outside into India, and I think in India, especially, businesses like these are very like homegrown, right? I mean, to
Yeah.
build a kitchen infrastructure piece in India, I'm guessing you can't cut copy paste from something that's done in the West, and maybe
Hmm.
that could have been some part of the problem, because why would you need that brand value from there, or some amount of input from there is I mean, that was my bigger question when I first heard the model and why they were coming here.
Yeah.
I don't know if that played into it, or if there was anything else that kind of led to it. And also the slowdown, I'm guessing, would have led to this as well.
Yeah, I mean, your point is right, which is essentially they were trying to rework ICE cloud
Yeah,
kitchens.
yeah,
So make the infra services, etc., standardized. But I think and I don't mean this in a negative way, but where bases can save money, they will save money,
yeah. And if you
and it's
if you see
something.
this, their rentals were 50 to 70% higher than the industry average, which is why nobody
Yeah.
took it.
Yep. Because they would have sold on, frou services, which one little Mundu can easily solve for at
Yeah,
half the cost.
exactly.
But enough on Mr. Kalanick.
And on to Mr. Musk, our favorite person to talk about. Elon Musk is now the good glam group of this podcast.
You say
um,
that with love,
with
with
lots
lots
of
of
love.
love.
So Elon Musk created a special system for showing you all his tweets first. I know that. Did you see too many of his tweets in recent times? Because I felt like my feed was only Elon Musk tweeting.
Varun, but this sounds like something you would do if you were Elon Musk running
I would.
Twitter. Many tweets dikhao.
You
But
know what
I'm
I would
quoting
actually do?
myself. My
You know what
tweet
I
is a
would
quote of
do?
me.
I would create an auto-generated GIF response to every single tweet, which would go from me.
Oh my God.
That's what I
Varun,
would do.
you would rename Twitter to Doogie. That's basically it. And Doogie would basically be like a montage of your hair.
No, I
That's
would make it.
that would be
I would
your
rename it to
logo.
Puttar.
Why?
Puttar में क्या हो रहा है आजकल?
Oh my God. Okay, let's just continue. So what happened over here? Mr. Musk's tweets were showing up everywhere, and
Yeah,
then
so supposedly,
Platformer did an article.
yeah, there's supposed to be a push. It's a legit thing. He did kind of ensure that, because there was, I think, the period where he felt his tweets weren't showing enough, and from the time he's actually bought Twitter, he's pushed that more and more into the front. I'm guessing some parts of what he's saying is because he's calling himself the Twitter support primary Twitter support person. That's why he wants to showcase himself more. But it's more like, I bought the platform. I want my tweets to be seen by everybody. That kind of a scene. It's like it's very like obvious why he would want it. And
Banta
he
hai,
keeps
bro. He
talking
paid
about.
$44 billion for this shit.
Dikha
The
do yaar,
least it
dikha the
could
tweet.
do is show more of his tweets.
Yes.
But in other news, Twitter also becomes the first social media platform to allow cannabis ads in the US. I have no
Dikha
comment
do.
on this.
Cannabis is what you need after you start reading some of the tweets you see on Twitter.
Cool. Great addition to this point. But there was sad news, man. Not sad, but
Yeah.
like, like
End of an era.
heart
End of an era news.
fluttering news. What happened, Varun? What are we referring to?
Susan Wojcicki, the YouTube OG CEO, she's stepping down
Gangster, brother,
after,
gangster.
I mean, like what, employee number 6 at Google. Google, what, I don't.
25 years.
And it started. You were saying this before we started on that, that Google actually started in her garage,
Uh-huh.
back in the day. And so if you look at it, like it's like end of an era. She took over YouTube at a time when YouTube was acquired by Google, and it was like a loss making entity. She grew it to what it is today, and she's handing it over to Neil Mohan, who will. And this is something which I heard on the Vergecast. He's not Neil Mohan is not taking over as CEO of YouTube. He's taking over as vice president. So
Okay.
versus Susan Wojcicki was functioning as YouTube CEO and almost like ran it like her own thing, right? She didn't. I think the reporting was pretty open-ended for her to do whatever she wanted. I guess this will integrate YouTube a lot deeper into Google as well. But yeah, Indian American Neil Mohan, who if I read right, it was product chief, is taking over as the head of YouTube now.
Yay, more Indians everywhere. This actually kind of makes me happy. Like,
East or
doesn't this happen
west?
with you? I'm genuinely like very happy when DCs do well. I'm also very like when DCs are at the center of scams, like Elizabeth Holmes's Bay. What was his
Yeah.
name? Sunny Balwani.
Sunny Balm. I have a question though. She said her tweet was today after nearly 25 years at Google, I'm stepping back to start a new chapter. Is she starting something?
Hmm.
Hmm. Am I reading between the lines here?
You are perhaps, but let's find out what Miss
Soon
Susan.
launching TubeU.
Great, great. But we're going to be talking about this later. Reliance is
I'm in a
apparently,
roll today of really bad jokes which nobody wants to laugh to. Fine,
and I
fine.
am fast forwarding over
This is
to
what happens
what
when
we're
I
going to
record on a
discuss
Monday night
later.
after I've been shooting all day.
Yes, but if I could just get to the next story, which is
Okay, okay,
we're going to
fine,
talk about
fine.
this later. I won't be able to say much because of employment issues. But Reliance is apparently taking on Nykaa with beauty e-com platform Tira. More on
Which
this
used to be called
later.
Tiara. It's called Tiara
Yes.
earlier.
Why did they drop the A,
But yes,
Varun? Give us a gauze.
but this is
Why
I
did
have
they
a
drop the A?
feeling the A was dropped because
Because
the name Tiara did not have the right kind of juju, but Chira does. Indian B2B businesses, rather startups, have cornered over 8.5 billion in equity funding from investors across 500 funding rounds since 2015. We don't talk about B2B enough, but B2B is really like seems to have done quite well in the recent past, and actually has done well in the long term as well.
yeah, yeah, we don't talk about B2B because we don't know much about B2B, Varun. Let's be honest
But
to
we
our
can talk about it.
listeners. Once in a while, when we pretend to know about all things that are happening in the world of B2B. No, but jokes aside, it's first off, India has probably the best track record. I mean, look at our best performing businesses. There's Zoho, there's Freshworks, there's Postman. All of these have absolutely crushed and have also generated. I don't want to sound like an auntie about this, but they've generated like actual tangible value. And
Hmm.
also, let's be honest, consumer businesses, especially in the Indian context, are extremely difficult to crack because of, again, margin structures, right? You end up having to do a lot of the infrastructure build up and development. So unsurprising, but India's B2B story is actually very, very, very impressive, especially for a bunch of these companies that have been able to establish a strong enterprise base in the US. But yeah, you said it. We should talk about Indian B2B businesses more often than we do.
Be good to get someone who's an expert in B2B on the B2B end and kind of get them onto the show. It'd be interesting to talk to someone. I don't know. Let's just find someone.
Concur. We will find
Yes.
someone.
Roald Dahl books rewritten to remove language deemed offensive. It's an interesting story. Just because there's a lot of stuff which has been used as terms and stuff in the past, which we've realized isn't kosher, and more importantly, not something which we should really be saying. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting step in the right direction.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm always a little conflicted about this, but I think in like Roald Dahl's case, it makes sense because his books are children's books, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean. Like so much of that context is lost on
Yeah, also
7
like
to 8 year
words
olds.
like they're saying enormous instead of fat. They're
Yeah,
saying they're not no longer calling anyone ugly. And in some cases they're making some characters gender neutral in that sense. So I guess in some ways you also realize that some things just insinuate and kind of
yeah.
feed into a child's mind a certain way. So it makes sense to kind of move away from those terms.
More of this should happen. More of this should happen.
Unilever is selling Annapurna and Captain Cook. They're selling both these brands for 60.4 crores. They're exiting the atta and the salt business, and it's a very very tiny price they're selling it off for. And And if you look
Especially
at
given
the
that they made 127 crores in revenue. So that's kind of
yeah,
whack.
which is a they're selling it to a Singapore-based group called Global Foods. I'm guessing from what the statement is that it's more about them exiting the category than it is about the price. But it doesn't make sense how much they're selling it for, or maybe it's basically they've realized that it's not sustainable in the long term from their strategy perspective. What they've actually said is that the reason why they're doing this is they want to drive. They're moving away from non-core categories and focusing in this space on the packaged business of dressings, scratch cooking, and soups. But Captain Cook was, I mean, legendary brand. Yeah, like even Annapurna also like a quite a legit brand. It's crazy.
Yeah, but generally an interesting trend, especially in these FMCG-ish companies, seems to be this push towards premiumization. Like it seems like Diageo is also doing more or less the same,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
a lot of the focus is now shifting towards more premium parts of the portfolio. From the sounds of it, HUL also wants to do the same, focus on categories like soup shoops and the like, right? Which are they're not necessarily like everyday categories. So the
yeah.
focus across the board seems to be leveling up almost.
Do you think it's also because you have so many more variants which are cheaper, but although Unilever, etc., have the distribution, and maybe because I mean the biggest competitor in this space is actually ITC,
Yeah.
and they've obviously gone far wider and deeper into the space. But it's interesting that Unilever has gone because Unilever was always also focused on some massive like mass brands and these are I mean, maybe Captain Cook has kind of become a shadow of its past, but
Sure.
Annapurna Atta was like a legit like massive brand. So interesting. I mean, obviously there must be more to it which we can't have to read into, but ऐसे ही होता है ना आटा रहा ना नमक.
That is life. That is life. And speaking of life, last fun news for today, Pathaan has crossed the 1,000 crore mark. How
Woohoo!
does this make you feel? Very happy, I suppose.
Very, very happy.
I
SRK for
still haven't
life.
seen the movie. I really
Yeah.
should go watch it now.
And coming to your side of fandom, there's an unsubstantiated news which Jalasmi has found, and we haven't been able to figure out if it's true or not. We actually want to ask the audience if you can figure out this true or not. During the Grammys, Taylor Swift asked the Swifties, which is the Taylor Swift fan club, do we call
Fans.
it fan club fans? And she said that she'd want them to reduce the cost of eggs, and somehow the cost of eggs have decreased in the United States post that. Trevor Noah asked her, and that's what's happened. But what I want to ask the audience is, if you think this is true, if you have some form of fact to substantiate this, please do share it, and we will do more thing about it. I know
I
what I'm
will
saying.
not be surprised if this is true because Swifties can do it all. They can do it all. But what are we talking about today, man?
We are talking about we're talking about Reliance's entry into the beauty e-commerce space. We're also tapping into Airbnb's profits. Plus, we're also going to get into this whole like blue tick subscription. Twitter's charging for it. Now Meta saying they're charging for it. So everybody's charging for it. So we're going to talk into that as well. But all of that after a break on Think Fast.
Hey everyone, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. We have a special announcement introducing Club Paisa Vaisa, where you get episodes of Paisa Vaisa 3 days before release, bonus and ad-free content, and access to the full show archive. So get your yearly membership today for only rupees $6.99. Log on to club.ivmpodcast.com/Paisa Vaisa. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus talks to Puneet and Ayushi about railway tracks being robbed in Bihar and Kharge wearing Louis Vuitton in the parliament and much more. On The Habit Coach, Ashton talks to Ashna Modi, clinical psychologist, about the dynamics of love, the key to a healthy relationship, and much more. On page 10, Abbas, Meghnad, and Karan talk about students being suspended over casteist jokes, spy balloons traced by the United States, and more. And on Anish Thing, Anish talks to Raghav, founder of Headphone Zone, about the audio gear available in India starting under rupees 5,000. Once again, do not forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcast.com. We've got some super cool and exciting stuff over there for you and your loved ones. Follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you like our shows, then do not forget to spread the word. You know, it really helps us a lot. And of course, don't forget to rate our shows on whatever platform you are listening to them. And of course, all our video shows are also available on youtube.com/IVM podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, Yono SBI, Capgemini, and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Think Fast. Today we're talking about the Airbnb's profits. Suchita, what do you have to say about their
Yes,
profits? Is it a
of
good profit?
course.
Is it a bad profit? Is there any profits? Is there no profit? Is there air in the BNB or
What
is
is
there
wrong with
no air
you?
in the BNB?
Oh my God, Varun, you're not allowed to take pee breaks because you basically morph into I don't know what. You morph into an Oompa Loompa when you come back to the show. But guys, I'm very excited about the story because I am a shareholder in Airbnb, and and I genuinely really love the company. I think what they've been able to build is so special, and people say Meta is once in a lifetime. I think companies like Airbnb are more closer
I
to it,
agree.
and
I agree.
we've discussed it a bunch of times in the past. But why don't you give us a quick blow by blow of the noteworthy numbers, and then we will give our tippenny on what makes this company special.
So in Q4, Airbnb's revenue grew by 24% year on year. It's at 1.9 billion. It's basically it's grown because of
Revenue, bro,
growth in.
not even top line revenue.
Wait,
Shit.
oh,
No,
सोचो
that's what I'm
मतलब
saying.
क्या.
Insane. Psh.
This is what
Yeah.
happens when a CEO doesn't expense his houses and stays in Airbnbs himself.
Yes. And in fact, puts his house on Airbnb
Exactly. It's so cool.
to
Imagine
make
you went
more
to a house
money.
and their CEO is there. I'm like, ये क्या सही है? But yeah, so it's grown because of an uptick in stays and experiences. Even the curated selection of tours and events is really kind of added to that as well. Gross nights booked in Q4 22 for more than a week. Wow, that's like crazy. People have booked for more than a week on in general. Is that what I'm reading here? Is my eyes deceiving
Yes,
me?
that's exactly what you're reading here.
Yeah. Yes. It's
We're 40% higher than in Q4 2019.
yes. I'm not able to read right now. I know what's happening.
Acha, I will just read the rest out.
Yes.
The total listings on Airbnb grew to 6.6 million. So they added close to a million active listings, on a year-on-year basis. And of course, I think the most noteworthy number, which you alluded to earlier also, is they generated 1.9 billion of net income. Its first profitable full year, which is obviously quite a turnaround from 2021 when the company lost 352 million odd dollars. So let me ask you this, man. We've discussed Airbnb so many times. We've spoken
Hmm.
about how they've made the most, like, contrary to popular belief kind of bets, and it seems to have really paid off for this company. What do you think makes this company special?
I feel what makes it special is that they have a certain philosophy and a way of functioning which they make sure they keep in mind no matter what they do. And it's look at this, right? Just pre-pandemic they were going to go for the IPO. The world shuts down. They had to obviously take certain measures to kind of bring themselves to a point, but they didn't, like, the company didn't suddenly become this, okay, we need to survive, shadow of itself. It stuck to its guns of how it functioned. And it also kind of gives that to the people, and especially with companies like Airbnb. Think of an Uber and Airbnb, right? You are people kind of renting out something which they have, to be a part of it, but just the kind of perks they give their hosts, the way they function with consumers, how they really work towards correcting things which they see are problems consumers face. Phil, that core philosophy goes so deep across every single thing that they do. I think it starts on the top for sure, but I think it's just generally how the company functions. I would put that at the core of it, because end of the day, you run a business at a by not moving away from what you stand for, no matter what happens.
Hmm.
You end up getting this amount of brand love from both the people who are your partners and your consumers, and
Yeah.
shareholders. I feel that's a core. I mean, that for me has always been the core part of Airbnb. Nobody's been able to do this balancing act better than they have.
Yeah. I know you've taken the more like emotional spin on all things
Always,
Airbnb, but
always.
always speaks from the heart, man, speaks from the heart. But for me, what Airbnb secret sauce really is their supply, right? I
Hmm.
think there are such few companies. Can you just imagine how difficult it is to build something today that is a marketplace and still
Yeah.
has differentiated supply? And the only
Yeah.
other company that comes to my head that's been able to make a go of this has been like Etsy. And then, maybe to some extent, marketplaces, quote unquote, like only flans, only fans.
Only
Sorry.
plans. Only plans is a different kind of product.
Yes, for people who like eating dessert. um or you know what I mean, like, or like maybe
Yeah.
like Patreon to some extent. But
Yeah.
it's just so rare to find companies that have struck a balance in between being an aggregator, having unique supply, and actually still very much having their differentiator being, for all practical purposes, competitive pricing for consumers. And I know we discussed this earlier, but if you look at one bet that they made in recent times where they went all in on brand marketing versus performance. So Airbnb actually grew their spends on, PR and brand to a majority
Yeah.
of their overall marketing pie. And I know we discussed this in a previous episode, but for those of you who hadn't heard that, stuff like that actually can only work in the case of Airbnb because they have that unique supply, right? When you,
Yeah.
like if I had to show you if I had to show you a picture of a igloo in the middle of, Alaska, and you wouldn't say it's Hilton hotels. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's so Airbnb.
Yeah.
And I think one small thing that I'll add over here is from a product perspective. I love that they haven't deviated from the basic things. Like when you open their app or their web, it's not like they have some fucking, like, AI angel falling from the sky or any of that other
Yeah.
rubbish. They've kept it very, very clean, simple, to the point, and really focused on, reviews and recommendations, highlighting their more unique, differentiated stays, and not screwed around too much. In fact, their worst years were when they were trying to become something that they were
Yeah.
never meant to be in the first place. Like,
The
remember when they were
content
doing
business and all that
flights?
stuff. They were doing content business also very deeply into
Yeah.
that. They were getting into the whole Airbnb studios.
They launched a magazine and I don't know what
Yeah.
else.
Interesting you said AI, right? Because Brian Chesky, when this whole thing's coming out, he actually said AI is going to play a pivotal role in their business. It's kind of like connecting, in his words, the, our search problem isn't really a search problem. It's a consumer inventory matching problem. So how do you kind of connect people to it? I think that's also looking at AI in the right way, right? You're using it to
Hmm.
solve a very specific problem. You're not making it like the broader feature of how everything functions. And that's how,
Yeah.
at least like I've always believed AI needs to be used, like a very core focused task. And then you learn and you kind of generate stuff through that. So again, like it shows that they're building it the right way. This is one other point is that they're fully remote. They
Hmm.
decided to be fully remote a while back, and the headcount is
Oh.
down about 5% from 2019. So that could also have added into just like the numbers, but I guess you can be a little leaner when you're functioning fully remote as well.
Yeah, no, but I think obviously two things that have worked in their favor has been, apart from differentiated supply, just use cases. Like
Mm.
Airbnb's sweet spot use cases. So, for example, the data point that you just read out, right? The most profitable segment is someone who books for a week.
Mm.
And that has obviously grown 40%. But it's awesome how through this differentiated supply, they found these really interesting niches that may
Yeah,
not be very apparent to you and me, and let's be honest, they're very like European and American niche use cases.
yeah.
Like, let me go work out of a mountain lodge for like 1 week. If you go and
But
tell your
it's
boss that in
happening a
India.
lot more in India as well. We're actually seeing that happen more and more, especially through the pandemic. It's not as much now as people are going back to offices, but this is surge of people who want to kind of work in different spots, and I don't think that's
Hmm.
going down as much. But it's definitely become a habit. A lot of people have gotten into through the pandemic. People who generally don't want to come and let's move to a place and come to an office every day. And if
Hmm.
you're a very like focus, I think a tech worker, especially someone in tech, someone in consulting, someone who's let's say in some aspects of the finance segment as well, they're really using this as the opportunity, and a lot of them end up staying in Airbnbs.
Interesting. Airbnb in India, what's your take on that? Because I think apart from Goa, it doesn't seem like they found a perfect match.
So they do have a lot of options. I also know a lot of people who use them, but what's happened in India is I think you also have very specialized ones that have come at it. You look at the Saffron Stays, look at some of the
Yeah.
others. A lot of them have taken over this, your local tourism spaces with someone's, guest house, someone's space like that. So I feel that's really been the thing is that a lot of people have taken the Airbnb model but done smaller scaled versions of that in different categories. And I
Hmm.
guess also Oyo also has been, but Oyo is a very different category of things, and you
Yeah,
can't
I was
count them
gonna
into
say
this.
Oyo technically is like Airbnb's Indian counterpart, but
Yeah, but also
lots
like
to
a
say
very
on that.
different way, right? They just take over hotels more than taking over, like being that whole house experience or the bungalow experience. So it's that breakup of things.
Hmm.
I'm guessing that played into it in India, although it's still there. I mean, I've used an Airbnb in India and it's really worked.
Hmm.
And Jalasmi has a important point here. The Indians trust hotels more than Airbnbs. They think of it from a
Yes.
safety standpoint, so that's a very important point.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you look at the general Indian story, nothing that isn't a managed marketplace has necessarily scaled. Like all the examples that you gave, whether it's Saffron Stays or any of these other guys, they're all managed marketplaces. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
Like you
yeah,
know it's a Saffron Stay property. You know that there's
yeah.
some amount of like staff, like Vista Stays, all these other guys.
Yeah,
Airbnb obviously doesn't take any accountability for any of that.
yeah, yeah, and that the reason why they all do that is in India you got to make sure the quality is a certain way, so at least you will come back for that, and that's why people tend to go back for a Saffron Stays or Isprava and Lohano, for instance, and
Yeah.
a few others, and I feel that that's something which if they have to kind of get into India, we are a very, I mean, we are spoiled for choice in the hospitality segment in India. Let's be honest. There's no
Yes.
country which I feel is like gives you the level of service from a hospitality standpoint that
Dude,
India does at
India
all
is top
levels.
notch. I concur.
So the bare bones Airbnb model, I guess it only works for people who are like not working from just like want to work out of Goa, stuff like that. But
Hmm. Hmm.
again, that long term 1 month, I know people took like a 1 month thing, but again they chose other aggregators who had bungalows or like apartments you could kind of rent. So, I mean, maybe in India they got to think of it differently. The other question is, do they need to? I mean, is this a
Not at
growth
all.
place for them? They have enough places where they're
Zilch.
growing.
Nada. In fact, what's interesting is, and not that I have data to back it, but I think Indians are more likely to use Airbnbs in Paris than they are in
Yeah,
Bombay. You
100%.
know,
I've used an Airbnb in
uh,
other countries many
yeah.
times, and it's been a great experience. I agree. Maybe we don't look at them. Yeah, we don't look at that option in India as much as we do abroad.
Yes, and on to the next.
On to the next one, which is I don't know how much you're going to comment on this story because you have many
I
legal
would comment
complications.
in Morse code.
So Reliance Retail's has forayed into the beauty e-commerce category with Tira, previously called Tiara, and basically they're going to be it's going to have dedicated makeup, skin and hair care, fragrances, bathing, men's beauty, luxury segments. Lots of players in this already. You obviously have a Nykaa there. You have at some point you have the Tata Click piece,
You
Sephora.
have
There's
Mintra Beauty. You have
Mintra
Amazon that
Beauty,
also does
SS
beauty.
Beauty, which is Shopper Stop. There's so many players in this already. And
Yeah.
if you look at other categories, there are people like Purple, etc., who are there as well. So if you
Hmm.
look at all of these, how much can Reliance can get into it is a question. But more than that, is that are they just getting into it because they're not in it,
Yeah.
or are they just getting into it because there is something else afoot? I mean, could be an acquisition, could be are they buying a bunch of global products and kind of making it almost exclusive to them? You never know. With Reliance, some of these plays kind of happen in the background, but they've taken some time to launch this. I mean, the name thing obviously happened, and then now they've come down to finally launching it.
Yeah, I can't say too much. But I mean, dude, obviously in this case, I am going to be pure play Team Nika for
Mm,
obvious reasons.
of course.
But keeping like my bias aside for a second, I think time and time again, you saw it with Big Basket, where Big Basket was the incumbent. Amazon tried to get into the whole, grocery delivery business. And from whatever I remember, I think they've pulled out of that segment in India at least. Um, you saw this whole like brouhaha about 10-minute delivery. Is 10-minute delivery going to disrupt Big Basket, so on and so forth. The point that I'm getting to is it takes a lot to get to the kind of scale that most like most incumbent
Dominant.
players in
Yeah.
these categories
Yeah.
are. So for example, if you look at Mintra and what it's done in fashion, it's
Yeah.
going to be impossible to beat them, man, or even
Yeah.
catch up with them.
Yeah.
So you don't play to catch up with them. You play to say, hey, you know what, they're number one, but this market is worth 50-60 billion dollars. If I can even get 10% of it, I'm in a great place. If I have like, $5 billion worth of GMV flowing through my pipes at like a 30-40% gross margin, I'm in a great place. So I think the point that I'm getting to is some of these markets are so large and are compounding fairly well. Even if you're in the fifth, sixth place, obviously a call that anyone, whether it's Tira or Tata Click or Tata Palette or whatever the hell those guys have launched.
Mm.
I think a big question that any of these guys are going to have to answer for themselves is, how really am I going to differentiate, from the incumbent, the
Yeah.
dominant player, and I guess that's my question for you. What do you really think are the possible differentiators in beauty?
I feel the differentiator isn't necessarily going to be, there'll be some products that will be available one place or the other, but I don't think that's going to
Yeah.
be a differentiator. It's going to be the customer experience. It's going to be, you tend to go after one app or one store because you like the experience there.
Hmm.
And I feel that's will continue. Although we're a very value-driven market as well, so the kind of costs you have, the pricing, etc. Reliance is great at figuring out really cheaper costs to kind of get things out there, but yet keep things
Yeah.
premium. So that could be one area of focus. But I feel also what will be interesting to see is because Ajio's grown. Just looking
Hmm.
at Ajio's fashion e-commerce one has grown 33%. Its customer base has grown 33% year on year in the, if you look at, and 62% year on year during the Q3 of 23,
Hmm.
which is their catalog size growth. It's interesting to see, maybe they're seeing one area grow and saying this is an opportunity to get into this as well. They kind of do go
Hmm.
together, but the learning from looking at something like a Myntra is maybe they don't necessarily go together. I know that Nykaa has gone the other way. We initially started beauty, now has fashion. But it'll be interesting to see what Reliance's gameplay is. But Reliance can play long, right? I mean, of all the brands
Yeah.
you looked at, Tata and Reliance are the two products, two companies who can really play long. And I feel they kind of betting on that and might have a long-term roadmap of how this all adds up. But I wouldn't be surprised if you have a ton of these Tira stores across the country. You're going to have it
Hmm.
connect some form to the e-commerce space. They also have, there could be something a geo consumer might get, for cheaper because they're
Yeah.
geo consumers. You can connect the dots with Reliance because
Hmm.
they're in every single
Everything.
category.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
if
you
there
brought
is a
up an
way they can play on
international,
that.
yeah, international. You brought up a really good point, which is, and this is my question for you. Why do you think they wanted to launch as Tira and not just, Ajio Beauty? You know what I mean? Like why would you not? So for example, Myntra's done that, right? Like Myntra's
Mm,
launched beauty as a subsegment, within Myntra itself. Amazon's done the same. And in fact, beauty as a BPC, not just beauty, but BPC as a category on Amazon is huge.
yeah.
It's like not trivial amounts of money, right? Same with Flipkart or any of these other guys. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think Mamaearth makes more money off of Amazon than it does, maybe even on Nika. Maybe I'm wrong
Mm,
about this, but I think that was in Mama's filings, where
yeah.
Amazon and Nika were more or less neck to neck. So
Yeah.
my question for you is, how come Reliance didn't just add beauty under the Ajio brand name, given how much they've also pumped into Ajio to make it as big as it is?
Could be a few reasons, right? One is that maybe they kind of see that should we bring fashion beauty together or not.
Hmm.
But I feel it could be almost like that could be one of the things we can kind of dig into and see where they're looking at this. They want to make this an individual, dedicated brand for beauty and focus primarily on beauty. So the consumer is not confused by going there for fashion and beauty and everything else. This is only for beauty, only for skincare, etc. And if they also added luxury in there, so they're looking at almost differentiating it from Ajio. So it's almost like
Hmm.
Tata Click versus Tata Click luxury in terms of how Tata does, but it still has a Tata Click there. I'm guessing
Hmm.
Reliance wants to kind of build a separate platform altogether, so there's no confusion.
Hmm.
Could also be an internal piece, just in terms of how they want it to function structurally, who's running what business, not dilute the growth engine that Agio is on, really the focus, and
Yeah.
suddenly adding this onto the plate as well. Could be multiple things like that. It's an interesting choice that they've decided to create an entirely new brand, instead of adding some form of geo into it. I mean, this would be one of the first things they've launched in recent times that doesn't have a
Correct.
geo added to it.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting, like, I mean, there's something to think about over there.
Yes, there is lots to think and talk about, but my lips are sealed for now.
So there's lots more to think about in our next story, but we will only get into that. We talk about verification marks on platforms with Twitter and Meta and some other interestingly weird things that Meta has announced, but Meta always announces some very interestingly weird things. But all of that right after this break. Let's see what accent I come back with next.
Oh my God, can't wait. I didn't say anything too mean about Reliance, right?
No, you didn't. Right.
I'm a reformed person.
థింక్ ఫాస్ట్లో మీ అందరికీ స్వాగతం. నా పేరు వరుణ్ గురెల్లా, నాతోనే సుచిత సల్వాన్. మేము ఈ పాడ్కాస్ట్ హోస్ట్‌లని సారీ రాంగ్ లాంగ్వేజ్. వెల్కమ్ బ్యాక్ టు థింక్ ఫాస్ట్. వాట్ యూ టాకింగ్ అబౌట్ రైట్ నౌ?
Just can't. I just can't. Guess who's not going to get verified on Meta? Does his name start with a V and end with an Arun? Yes.
I am already verified on Instagram, by the way.
Squeeze. Facebook also counts. You're not
I
there.
don't
You're
look
not
at
verified
Facebook.
there
I'm
yet.
not there on. I don't. But actually, this verification thing. Anyway, we'll get to the story. So, Twitter sometime back announced that they were revamping Twitter Blue, their subscription service. It rolled out in India as well, where you can have to pay on platforms if you're buying it on the app 800 rupees to be able to see less ads, not no ads, less ads, post longer videos. I think you can add lists of things on your profile and a few other random pieces like that. People were dissing it, and also there were many people who found a way to hack it, because if you go on the website and sign up, you pay only 660 rupees versus 800 rupees. I think because of the Apple and Google share that they pay out. And our lovely people at Meta have announced that for Facebook and Instagram as well, they're launching a paid blue tick verification system. They're launching it in Australia and New Zealand, where people can starting price of $11.99 per month on the web and $14.99 a month on iOS. So you can get a verified badge as long as you show minimum activity requirements and government issued IDs. It's not available for business profiles, weirdly enough. So yes, are you going to shell out this kind of money to get verified on either Facebook or are you verified on Instagram or
No, I'm
Twitter?
not, Varun, because I did not pay to get verified.
I didn't pay to get verified. I applied for it and I got it.
Excuse
I
me.
have
You gave like hugs to like Meta employees at the
Zuckerberg in
Meta
the
Summit.
metaverse. Yes, yes.
My
No.
God.
I got verified. I'm not verified on Twitter. I have applied on Twitter to be verified in the past and have got rejected. But I got
What?
accepted by Instagram. I mean, I rejected it. It never got approved. It was an application I put in on the app and it never got approved. But Instagram,
Interesting.
weirdly enough, gave me a blue tick a couple of years ago on my birthday. It was a weird
Oh,
day to wake up in the morning and see a
cute.
blue tick. Zuckerberg
My
loves
God.
me. Zuck
Best
loves me.
birthday present ever. No, but just
Yes.
getting to the story, I think first off, I know it's not directly related, but it's semi-related to my prediction for this year, lest
Hmm.
you forget, which is credibility for creators being a general theme that's going to
Hmm.
run through 2023, which was one of my predictions, ladies and gents. But I'm unsurprised, but I think this is like desperately needed. I was listening to this podcast on like Ryan Holiday's whatever that stoicism podcast that he
Hmm.
has
Daily
with
Stoic.
Sam Harris,
Yeah.
who I genuinely like listening to.
Yeah.
And Sam Harris said this, really interesting sort of part in the episode about how essentially platforms like Twitter, Meta, and all have ruined what the experience of social media should be because of the business model, right? So if content is for free, essentially you're training consumers to just take what they get at no cost at all.
Hmm.
But I do think now this new wave of the internet is going to really be Google's mission statement, which is organizing the world's information.
Yeah.
And the way Google organized the world's information was based on essentially cues on popularity, recency, engagement with content. The only thing that's really needed on the internet today, however, is credibility. So the point that I'm getting to is I think I am personally very excited about what this means for what the next social media could look like. Like when this was announced, the only thing that was going on in my head was, can the next social media company really come out now? Because if you think about it, when was the last time there was Be Real that came up about 3-4 odd years ago? But
Hmm.
Be Real's monthly active users have declined over the past two
Yeah.
years. So earlier their monthly active users were, or daily active, I'm forgetting what the metric was. It was at 21 million. It's down to about 10 million now. But I just think this is a great time to build a product in all things social media. Because if the big guys can train consumers to
My
cuff
bet
up
is on
and pay
Reddit.
up, your bet is on Reddit making a resurrection.
It's already resurrected. Reddit, actually, if you look at it, a large amount of the community building, even for people who are YouTubers, especially YouTubers. I mean,
Hmm.
look at this. Creators who have the most amount of audience connect are YouTubers. Most of them do their community engagement on Reddit. A lot of them do it on Reddit, for instance, and use that to really engage and converse with their communities.
Hmm.
So I think Reddit's an interesting one to look at, just from just really how they've revived themselves. Platforms come almost like the water cooler of the internet, which is
Yeah,
actually what you thought Twitter would be, but
it
this
would
that
be.
Reddit actually is that, because the whole
Yeah.
topics and the conversations on that are very interesting. But I feel this blue tick thing also kind of comes with the fact that it's trying to solve two things, right? One is it's a interesting way to just add revenue, because even at
Hmm.
like a certain, even a tiny scale, is going to add a substantial amount of
Yeah, yeah.
revenue for these platforms. But I feel verification is such an important piece on social media, not just about bots,
On the
but everything else,
internet,
right?
bro, on the internet.
Everywhere. And if you look at even like what I don't know if you saw this, right? Elon Musk announced the fact that unless you have Twitter Blue, you can't use SMS as two-factor
Two-factor
authentication piece.
authentication. Yeah.
You have to use an app instead, and people are kind of going up in arms in it. And he actually tweeted back and said that Twitter loses, I mean, I forget the number, I look it up, just the amount of millions, if not billions, millions rather, every year, because of fraudulent SMSs on two-factor authentication. They actually, because they have to pay service charge on that part. And so it's just that is that it's such a big problem on, it's one of the biggest problems on the internet, is that you don't have verified accounts, and there's too many fake accounts across the board.
Yeah.
This is a way to organize it and also make money with it, so it's a smart thing. You got to give Elon Musk credit for pushing through on this front. And as Zuckerberg does,
He's a
he follows.
visionary.
Copy
He's a
करता है, अच्छा
visionary.
अच्छा copy करता है, अच्छा, very good copies.
Yeah, no, but yeah, I'm personally very excited about the new wave of content consumption on the internet, and hopefully, this finally teaches people to, you know, pay up for good content, man. Good content ain't for free.
There's also
It
an
ain't for
interesting
free.
piece which I don't know if you saw, what Zuckerberg announced as well, for Instagram, is they're launching channels on Instagram. They
Interesting.
almost function like the broadcast lists, broadcast channels work on WhatsApp. It's literally that on messaging, and because the insight supposedly is that a large amount of the content sharing on Instagram is done on DMs.
Hmm.
And so till now it's only one-on-one DMs. You can make a channel, people can join it. Two creators and collaborate on a channel, so you can actually build community. I think this is their way of trying to build community within Instagram by saying you can join a channel for a creator can create multiple channels. So let's say if you're a certain
Interesting.
kind of creator, you can have multiple threads and channels for specific topics. And like for a musician, you could have something for tour dates, and information on tours. You could have one for like AMAs. So I feel it's going to obviously make the as they've done in the recent past. Going to make Instagram even more complicated.
Hmm.
But this is what they've announced, and right now only I think 5 to 6 creators in the world have been given access, apart from Zuckerberg and Adam Mosseri.
Hmm.
And even like Adam Mosseri, I think, put a poll up, and he realized it was getting a little spammy for people, so he apologized, saying we still have, it's a very early stage, still working on it in that sense of the word. So that's what's been happening on Instagram. Also, like in a full facepalm piece for people, because I saw a couple of people ranting about it on Twitter. He's also mentioned that this year they went too far in prioritizing only reels, and they're going to give enough priority to photos and statics as well. And there were people ranting saying, I literally moved my entire brand's marketing to reels, and now you're telling me I have to go back to statics again.
Yeah, but I also made this as a part of my
You
prediction
did.
early this
You
year,
did it.
which is, everyone needs to start owning their audience. And I think this is what credibility on the internet enables you to do. You know what I mean? Like you finally
Yes.
have, it's kind of like the closest you get to, being an NFT. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like it's
Yeah.
the closest you get to actually having audience ownership in what you have to say, and also vice versa. So yes, net, very excited, and very excited. We have ended this
But are you going
episode
to
at
pay for any
53
of these
minutes.
things? Are you going to pay for anything?
you know, um, I feel like it takes one unpleasant incident to make consumers pay. So I don't know if this has happened to you, but I've seen it happen to a bunch of my friends where they've had like, duplicate accounts created by randos on the internet using their face and their identity and their pictures and this, that,
Yeah.
and the other. And I feel like it takes that one sliver of an incident to, you know what I mean, just get
Yeah.
you to take your credibility and identity on the internet much more seriously.
Yeah.
So will I pay? I don't know, man. I think it'll have to be some interesting turn of events that make me want to cough up 600 rupees a month for this shit.
And I also check the details. $60 million a year is what Twitter was losing by being scammed by phone. Basically, fake two-factor authentication SMS messages. They were paying $60 million a year. That's what they're saving by
Wow.
moving this there. Okay. पैसे बचा रहे Musk Baba.
Good job, Muskie. Good job.
So we just have recommendations left. Welcome back to Think Fast, where I have a recommendation and Suchita's still thinking about hers. I don't
As
know
do
why I'm sitting
I.
like this.
I
Oh, you
found
already have
mine.
yours. You found us.
But
Okay.
you go
So my
first.
recommendation is this really fun show on Netflix called Class. I haven't binge watched a show in a long time. I was pleasantly surprised as to how much fun this was to watch, and it's generally like. Also, it's good to see an adaptation that was really brought about. It's an adaptation of this Netflix show called Elite, which is in I think Spanish show, but they actually made it very contextual to India. I think it's very smartly made. It's got a nice layer of while you have all the masala fun of murder in a high school, everything else. It's got a layer of little perspective on class and casteism and everything else as well, but done in a very very nice way. So I'd recommend the show. I watched it like in literally like over a couple of days. Even while I was on holiday, I had in between I just had to finish one episode.
Wow. What am I going to recommend? I am a sucker for like good coffee table books because I actually read coffee table books, unlike most people who I know who have coffee table books. There's one that I bought recently. It's called Textiles, The Art of Mankind. It's by Mary Schuesser. I am
Sure, sir.
butchering her name. But in any case, for those of you who are like textile fiends, like who you love a good fabric and you love texture and like cotton, silk, satin, etc. speak to you, this book is just brilliant. It showcases the most extraordinary collection of textiles. Varun's gone to sleep from the from the 8th century plus, but generally if you love all things textiles and if
The only kind of textiles
fabric.
I like is when Mithun Chakravarti said, "मैं आज मैं लुंगी उठाती तुमको disco दिखाती," and he spoke about a lungi.
Oh my god, thank you for ruining my recommendation, you fucking Reta. That's what you are. I'm going to change your name to Reta Dugirala.
Raita, yes.
Oh my god. And that's it?
That's
Bye,
it for
my
this week.
friends.
It's a reasonable. We thought it'd be a short episode, but as always, it's not a short episode. We'll be back next week with more deets and hopefully a few more interesting stories. And I think maybe time to get a guest on. Let's think of a guest to get on in the next couple of
Yes,
weeks.
and you will also announce your new venture on our
My venture
next
will be announced
episode.
in a few weeks' time. But first, one thing fast, then everywhere else.
Acha, lovely. Seal deal. Bye,
Okay. Bye,
guys.
Toodles.